first time I've seen it too.
Call the meeting to order. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and the city in which we live. Guide us this afternoon as we make any decisions. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Mr. Phillips, if you'll remain standing. I'll call on you as we get started, just to give everybody a 30-second quick review of where we were, what we're doing, our guests today.
Yeah,
We'll move on.
you may remember Jeremy Emmett.
Right.
We had a retreat down in Thomasville. We were in actually his downtown hotel. He came in and said a few words and was a gracious host to us that day. But as you know, we've been having discussions with Mr. Emmett about the potential of a hotel location on our downtown 57 East site. And I know we've been talking about some potential, how that framework may look. We haven't really gotten into any type of conceptual stuff, but you had asked us to ask Mr. Emmett to come up, give a little bit of Q&A, a little presentation. I've told Mr. Emmett before the meeting, it's pretty informal. I know he's got a slide deck here, but I know that he said he wants to have more of a conversation as opposed to just doing a complete presentation. But I think without further ado, we're going to call on Mr. Emmett, come to the podium, introduce himself, go through a little slides, and we'll have a little Q&A session.
Thanks. We appreciate it. Mr. Emmett, we appreciate you being here today. And of course, I didn't say it earlier, but the purpose of this meeting is a special call meeting of the Newnan City Council for a work session on the Brown Steel or 57 East property and a proposed downtown hotel. So, Mr. Emmett, we appreciate you making the trip up today. Thank you for being
Yeah,
here.
thank you for having me. For those that don't know me, my name's Jeremy Emmett. I'm the owner and chief operating officer of Red Hills Hospitality. I'm not a public speaker. I don't like the way my voice sounds coming through a microphone, so I have to take a few minutes to get used to that. But like you said, I brought a presentation today because I wanted to kind of go through some of the points. But the main reason for this presentation and the printouts that you have is so that I can leave you with something that you can look at afterwards. So you can add to the questions you might have tonight if you forget something. And just give us a guide. My point tonight is to sort of guide us through what a project like this would look like from start to finish. So please feel free to stop me at any time. So of course we have our title slide here with your beautiful city. This is kind of a redundant slide for you guys because I think you all know where the site is. Just wanted to show you that I have seen some of the preliminary site study slides just to kind of get an idea of what you're looking at. Before I saw this, I figured that we were going to be breaking this site up into smaller pieces with those interior streets, so this makes a whole lot of sense. I'm not going to weigh in on which one I think's better because I believe that's up to you guys. But I did want to sort of point out that top site is the site that we think would be best for the hotel. It's that 1 acre site there in the middle. This shows a layout of a hotel now, and I think that I will tell you that the L orientation of the hotel is going to be the way to go. We're looking at about 125 rooms, which was kind of a result of a couple of feasibility studies you guys had commissioned and done. But I've done some footprint studies on it, and you can fit in that 200 by 200 by 200 basic square that you have there. The footprint will fit. I do have my own ideas on that. I know that all of these buildings are not set in stone. That size lot will not allow for all surface parking on site, but in a downtown, there's a lot of wiggle room you get for adjacent parking, parking within a certain distance, valet parking and the rest. So we can let that be an issue for another day, I think.
So you wouldn't necessarily be looking for a parking deck?
It would not be necessary.
Okay.
There's a lot of creative ways to deal with parking, especially if you already have existing parking. I'm sure y'all probably had a parking study done in the past, and usually when you have those done, we had one done in Thomasville, and they said, you've got plenty of parking. You just got a problem with people wanting to walk. So the whole idea is to put something between where they have to walk from to where they're walking to, because as long as that distance is interesting, they don't mind walking at that point. So
Right. Okay.
this represents kind of an end cap and kind of goes along with that walking from to plan. Again, this is just another slide of this concept plan that you guys have already seen. Again, the site. And this was just the basis of what I'm going to present today. I wanted you to know that I had seen this. Okay, so, and city staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but the next few slides are examples of feasibility studies that y'all had done. One was for more of a boutique hotel. It was looking at about 125 rooms. It had some occupancy and revenue figures. It had a really high rate. One of the things that I try to make sure I let cities know is that in a downtown, Newnan is not a small town, but when you're trying to go for that downtown, small town feel and bring people, the boutique hotel, I tell folks, is almost a dirty word because people think that boutique means quality. So it means something that's special. What we found is that you can go with one of the brands, and our favorite brand is actually Marriott. You can take that brand and it's a flagship business class hotel that's going to bring people to an area that may not have an event or something going on Monday through Thursday. It'll bring that number of people that are going to be staying in the hotel, whether it was downtown or it was on the highway. It's just going to, those brand loyal people are going to come to that hotel. They're going to walk out of the hotel and they're going to see where they are in this lovely downtown area, and they're going to walk around on nights where you typically wouldn't have that many people downtown. Then on the weekends, you still have that same business class hotel, but you have built it in such a way that it still meets the need of that boutique feel. And that makes it the best place for leisure and tourism type activities on the weekends. So it kind of gives you that safety of having that brand with that built-in loyalty program, that built-in demand, that base of customers on nights that are not generally your busiest downtown nights. And then the quality of the build just kind of adds to the weekends and the things that you have going on in your events and such. So this was the first feasibility study. And again, this presentation is just to leave behind. I think you probably all have copies of this, but I wanted you to know that I've looked through it. You see the high rates. Those would be higher than what you would probably get at a Courtyard on a normal night. This hotel will appeal to a broader range of customers as well for that very reason. The second study was for a 180-room conference center hotel. It had much lower rates, more comparative to your highway type hotels in rates, with a I think the occupancy was within, I want to say it was 60, I can't read the slide right this second, but I say it was around 60% occupancy. So what we did was we took that 125-room concept, which is what we think is the right size, because that is the actual prototypical Courtyard number of rooms is 125, which lends itself to a more efficient build. That can be fit into 4 stories, which I think is the maximum height restrictions here. We took those last 2 feasibility studies, and then we did some of our own market research to come up with a rate of 60% and $169 ADR. Now, I'm fairly confident in these numbers because I would be building the same brand that I've built in Thomasville, Georgia. This rate is actually only $10 above the Courtyard average for the brand, and that includes hotels on the highway. I think that's a safe number to start with so that we make sure the project is successful, but I hope that we'll be able to expand that over time. So this slide is not something I'm going to stop on. This is strictly for transparency. I gave you a copy of my budget format that shows every line item of expense. So I've tried to be as transparent as possible with both my revenue figures and my expense numbers so that you could vet those out on your own to see if you agree with these numbers. So I'm not going to stop on. There's 4 slides of that. And then what I've done is I have a format that I use to run 4 or 5 different types of models. You have a standard budget method, you have average cost, standardized cost methods, different kind of methods that we use in the hotel industry to determine what we think that the revenue and the gross operating profit, and then eventually the amount of money that's available for debt service at the bottom. So we run those and then we averaged them out because this project obviously is not developed. So we felt like an average would be the best number to start with here. So this represents that, and then it extrapolates those numbers out at a 3% inflation rate over the first 5 years. I also have that in a 10-year, but I thought for this conversation, the first 5 years was more fitting. Fits on the page better as well. So I don't want to just skim past it. So I know it's a lot of numbers. Are there any questions on any of these slides so far, as far as the assumptions we're making here? This is probably more of a study afterwards. This is not the hotel. This is the Courtyard by Marriott, though. And the reason I wanted to show you this next set of slides was to show you the information that I've told you about the Courtyard, the average number of rooms, the amenities of the brand, the build cost, things like this. This is what your prototypical new Courtyard 125-room hotel looks like.
Could I ask a question? If you
Sure.
go back to that last
Absolutely.
page, on year 5, your numbers kind of take a dip. Why is that?
Which numbers now?
The 5th column over, year 5?
Let me pull up here so I can see, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at it just real quick as you're going through it.
Could also be a typo, so let's make sure that's
I
not.
just want to make sure, because like, everything looked like it was taking a dip, and I'm like,
It should be going up slowly.
it was up until year 5, up until year 4. then
It's
all of
probably a
year 5.
typo then.
Are you looking at the revenue line item, Councilman?
What line are you looking at?
I was kind of just looking at all the, I just taking a quick look down all the figures.
Yeah, some of your expenses even off. The ones, so just so you know, the top line is actually your summary, and this is kind of confusing. The top line where the years 1 through 5
Yep.
is just a summary of the top and bottom line numbers.
Okay,
And so if you look below, these 5 lines below that with the different calculations, forecast calculations of the same thing.
okay,
And so if you look to the far left, you'll see that those 4 methods are put into an average to come up with the expenses available for, the revenue available for debt service
okay.
there at the bottom. So it does go up steadily, I think, there, but thanks for,
No, but I see what you're talking about, revenue general, or admin general goes down.
But like a lot of,
yep, that's just what that is if you'll notice, that's a lot lower, so it gets kicked out, but that's what's called a standardized expense method. So this standardized expense method is going to be the most confusing of these if you look at them, because they take all of the hotels we've had experience with them and average all of their actual expenses. Because, you have hotels if you look at your average, it's much higher because your payroll for your admin is probably going to be higher in a city like Newnan than it would somewhere else. So that's why that's just another method.
okay, thank you.
Maybe too much information too, So the brand, getting back to the brand, these are just slides that show you some of the square footage requirements. Just wanted you to know that it matches the footprint and the build size of the hotel in Thomasville. This goes through kind of the requirements for the brand, the different amenities, the differences in the room types, just things you might want to look at later. Again, this is just a standard footprint. It's a long rectangular building. It wouldn't be suited for your site. These are your average rooms at a Courtyard. You have suites, 2-room suites, inline suites, and then king and queen standard rooms. If you stayed in Thomasville, I'm not sure, did y'all stay overnight? So we do have some different types of rooms, and that is flexible. So I wanted to show you what the Courtyard standard was, though. Next, these are pictures of the prototypical Courtyard by Marriott. With its finishes, a lighter, more modern look. It's still nice, but it's probably not what you would be looking for in a city like Newnan. Here is an example of rooms. The bathrooms are actually very modern and nice. If y'all stayed at my hotel, I will let you know that your hotel would have shower doors. I hated those showers from the day we built it. It has to have shower doors, so. It has a half wall with a glass wall. That is the shower, but I will never build a hotel again with that shower wall, so you will have doors. This is an example of some of the things they do with the prototypical brand, the murals on the wall, the bright colors. The furniture is, it's high quality, but it's a little less quality than what we would like in our hotel. It's got all wood tops, things like that. So, y'all have had the benefit of staying there, so you've actually seen it firsthand, but just wanted to show, and I should have started with the pictures, but this actually, the reason I added this slide is because if you see, this is Thomasville's footprint. I would expect for your hotel to be a little bit more of an L, but this is what I use for the site fit on your 200 by 200 site. So everything that's in that top square would fit on your site. So the hotel, sidewalks, all the amenities would fit. The only thing that we would be missing is some parking that would be needed. This hotel is also 106 rooms, and I'll get to how we can kind of finagle that later. But this is the type of quality hotel that we would want to build. Nothing like the prototype. When one of the biggest compliments we get for this is is that this was an old building, or that we restored something. This is built from the ground up. This was an old Rose's department store. So this was all. Now, your hotel won't look like this because it's important that your hotel is specific to Newnan and to what y'all want for a hotel, not what Thomasville has. But I just wanted to point out the quality items on the build. You have your Pecky cypress ceilings, which are the reclaimed wood that sits in the water for almost 100 years. They pull it out. You've got barnwood, the reclaimed barnwood on your front porch here. Really upgraded lanterns, fire pits, the windows. A normal hotel has one window per room with the AC. These all have two to look more historical. We don't want it to look, I've heard that if you try to make something too historic looking, it can kind of look Disney World. So it's not necessary that your hotel looks like a historic building like this one. It could also have elements of metal. It's really up to the decision makers and stakeholders in town to determine. But I just wanted to give you an example of some of the quality materials that we were planning on using. Again, the rooms, I showed you the rooms before because I wanted you to see the difference between what a prototype is and just what you can get by just sort of toning down the color palette, bringing in solid surface tops, a little bit more quality window treatments, lighting, things like that. I didn't get a good picture, and I wish I would have, but we also don't have any art that's not local. So the hotel has a budget of about, General Hotel has a budget of about $80,000 or $90,000 for just printed artwork. And it usually comes from a big artwork company, and they ship it in, you have prints made. This hotel, if you'll notice, there's no art in the rooms because the rooms, we didn't feel like they really needed it, and so we wanted to spend that $80,000 or $90,000 buying some really expensive, probably more expensive than I would have if I was the ultimate decision maker on the art, but it's crazy. But that piece behind the desk there was about a $27,000 piece. But what we did was we bought these artists' art at a local art show, and then they agreed with those purchases to provide rotating amounts of art on loan and for sale to anyone who stays at the hotel. So I would say there's probably 30 or 35 pieces of art in the hotel, and every bit of it is local and for sale, except for the 2 or 3 pieces we bought. So, Courtyard does have a bar. It's very important to me to point out that one of the reasons we picked Courtyard instead of Step Up on Marriott, well, I say Step Up, but a little bit more boutique, like an autograph collection by Marriott, is because it requires you to have a restaurant, and that restaurant is usually something that would compete with your local restaurants that you already have. I think the idea behind a hotel like this is to promote economic development and to promote those businesses and restaurants that already are in town. So while it's a brand requirement to have a bar and a small bites menu for breakfast and for dinner, when I was having the meetings in Thomasville, I would say if my restaurant competes with yours, you need to step up your game because it's not that kind of thing. So we actually encourage folks to leave the hotel to go explore the town. So again, there's no way to zoom in on this, is there? Okay, if you'll notice, y'all have got the printouts. If you'll notice on the top right, top of the building.
Jeremy, there's a pointer, that red line, you can point.
Right here?
It might be working. There you go.
So this part. So y'all were in this part of the building. This is where we did the meeting space. I think a little bit of meeting space is something that you'll want in the hotel, but we originally had rooms on this bottom floor. So like I said, the prototype is 125 rooms, and you can build that plus or minus. It doesn't really have to be exactly 125 if the efficiency of the build calls for 127 or 122. But a 4-story building with the type of meeting space we have probably would be short of that 125 rooms. And so I wanted to point this out early in the process while you're still doing some of the planning, that while I know 4 stories is okay in your community, if you wanted to get more rooms, it may require 5 stories on that small of a footprint. Now, you could expand that footprint a bit and take care of that, the redesign and the survey, but strictly on the lines as they're drawn now, 4 stories, very limited meeting space, or meeting space on an out parcel in a separate building, would accommodate 125 rooms, but this model with meeting space on the ground floor would not quite get it without 5 stories.
About how close, what ballpark number would you say?
Probably 110 to 12 rooms. We can, there's some things we can do a little bit more efficiently. We were trying to do, for instance, I do not recommend this. It was a branch as the breezeway. It is it's a great event place, but it takes up a lot of space for the rooms on the top floors as well because of the way the building has to be configured. So the way our site was oriented, where our corner, where we're sitting about 2.5 blocks off of downtown, we wanted to make sure that the building oriented people back towards downtown. And then when they came out, they felt like they were, being led somewhere. The way your building would be oriented, it would really empty out right onto Broad Street. So I don't know that that's necessary here. And so to answer your question, you may be able to pick up some rooms in this area and here. So I would say probably 112, 113. So any more questions from this slide?
I have a question related to the conference area. By the way, I'm very impressed with Thomasville build. But that being said, you had mentioned going to 5 stories. If we went to 5 stories, trying to understand the possibility of having a larger rooms for conference, that's what you're implying, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so what do you see would be the square footage if we went to 5 stories?
The square footage now is somewhere around 2,000 total square feet, but it's split up.
Are you talking about just conference space that you
Just
would have?
conference space.
Okay, so what would be the increase if we went 5 stories and we maintain, and then you could still achieve your 125, correct?
You could achieve your 125, but your conference space would still stay around the 2,000.
Okay,
So what that does is that allows you not to cut conference space for rooms.
got it, okay.
So if you're saying 2,000 feet of conference space, what's the capacity of that?
With the way ours is split up, the total capacity of all of our meeting space combined is around 140 to 50, I believe. I know it's around 140. I don't want to say 150. I think somewhere in the middle there from the fire department.
Yeah.
Now, the main room is the one that does 100. The smaller room, I think, that's what I'm saying, I think it's 43. So the middle room can also be split down the middle with a partitioning wall and split into 2 rooms as well. But just keep in mind too is that there's nothing to say, especially when you start figuring out parking, there's nothing to say that you can't expand bottom floor space. So just because this is an L with no, cutouts or anything for additional meeting space doesn't mean that can't be done. Sure. We're already going to have an issue. The reason I didn't point that out before is because this would be the most efficient to include parking, but if we're parking off-site anyway, then, all bets are off there as far as what we could provide.
Is it possible, like, on the backside of the L, off of Broad Street, you just do like a split level, so four floors on Broad and a 5th floor back up behind there, so it's kind of a little bit more hidden?
Yes, you can. So you can do step downs. And that could also sometimes lend itself to rooftop activities. Now, I will caution, the rooftop stuff, it gets very expensive because, and my budget models do not include that because the building has to be reinforced in a way so the roof can be usable. Now, that's a decision that every city has to make, and sometimes it can open up conference space. It can really be an asset to the community. But when you're just going there to add a high-class restaurant and a bar, and you already have restaurants and bars, that's probably not the best use of money. Conference space is some of the smartest use I've seen on rooftops, so. But yes, that's possible. In fact, in Thomasville, if you notice, did anybody ever see the executive suite when you were there? So it really wasn't supposed to be in the hotel, but it was.
We didn't spend much money, we stayed cheap.
I'm sorry. I should have showed it to you. Somebody must have been staying there, but there's a room on the end of the hotel. It's actually this end. It's on the 4th floor. And what happened was we did take that in consideration because the way our buildings lay out is Dawson Street is more of a business-oriented street. There's a church across, the YMCA is over here, but as you go down Remington, you start hitting our historic neighborhoods where your homes are. And so as one of the kind of design ideas we had to sort of minimize that squared off impact, we did take the roof line down to a lower number of stories, which lended itself to having that, that roof line out in front of the room like you would have if you did it there. And probably not the smartest move because not every roof line can be a balcony. It takes a little bit of doing to make one. But we decided to not have the wasted roof line and make that a balcony. So then we took 3 rooms and turned it into an executive suite. And it's completely decorated it's got heart pine floors, which I do not recommend in a hotel. It's got heart pine floors and, custom furniture, and it looks like Thomasville. And so it's one room. I would have liked to have my 3 rooms back from a revenue standpoint, but it is a very special thing, especially for weddings, things like that, so.
If you were to say do a split level like that, just ballpark, I know this kind of a swag number is how many rooms do you think you could add to that to try to get to that 125?
So honestly, I think if you did go up to a 5th story to get to the 125, because your floors are going to have around 33 to 36 rooms per floor. Don't quote me on that, but that's pretty close. So you don't need necessarily your entire 5th floor to come to the 125. So I know we're thinking about design now at this point, but there would be a possibility. And I think you've probably seen it. Have you ever been to a hotel where you go up the elevator and the elevator's sort of halfway down and you go up the elevator and when you get out, you're in a little hallway area and you walk out of a door and it's the roof line is that would be something probably that would be smarter than trying to do a half and half front to back, would be to maybe turn the building to where, and I don't want to go I'm going to do it anyway, sorry. I'm going to do it, since we're having this. Instead of turning the building to face Broad, you could always do this L where it's not on Broad, or you could turn it where your higher part was up against the buildings, because that site does kind of go down there. And so as it comes back towards town where it gets higher, you could probably do like a half and half to minimize that impact as well, so that the higher part would be further down the hill, if that makes sense, like the lower part being in this area, the higher part being here. Just a thought, so.
Jeremy, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Thanks for being here. I feel like I've gotten a great education on Marriott. I feel a little bit like I'm being asked to join in as an investor, hearing all your performance stuff. But question for you is, if you were to take did you get my questions that I sent earlier in the week from Cletus?
I did.
Okay. Do you have any answers to those?
I do. They'll be included. I've got them included in this presentation.
Perfect. Because we're talking a lot about site, and that's really what I wanted to.
And you are, in a way, being asked to join as an investor. It's an investment, because this is an economic development project. It's also an investment project. So I'll detail that here, but that's purposeful that it feels that way. Because in essence,
maybe we could toss in our land as part of an equity investor.
there's a lot of things and that's kind of what I want to get to. And one of the reasons, to your point.
I mean, you're raising 5, we put in 5 in land, and we're 50-50.
Yep.
I like that.
To one of the reasons why I actually gave this was actually one of the responses to the questions. And the answer, the way that these hotel deals work, and
To one of my
sounds like-
questions, this is the response to that?
this is one of the responses, and I'll tell you how it's a response, is
Okay.
that what I've tried to do here is lay out from a feasibility standpoint, from the studies that you've received in the past, from the cost of build that we won't know until we start having the discussions about, do we want 5 stories, do we want 4, how do we want to lay it out, parking, no parking, is that nothing's hidden. This is what I think the hotel will do from a revenue standpoint, down to every line item. And the thought here is not to ask the city to provide anything that's not necessary for the project to be successful and operate and be here in town. So There's a balance between the amount of money that needs to go into a project so that there's a return available to get equity money to come to the table to be able to finance something like this, and the extra cost it takes to make a building look that way over the prototype, as, you know, for a downtown as opposed to the highway type setting. But the whole idea is gonna be to take out the revenue and the expenses and lay it on the table over here. Talk about how we want this hotel to look and lay that cost out over here and see what that bottom line is available for debt service, and then have a conversation about what it takes to get that for our company and for the city of Newnan.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe this is the question you're answering, just to let you know what the question was. It was like, I think we're being asked as a city to give a lot.
You are.
Okay, and so I don't know if this is the answer to that. My question back to you was, what are you giving us?
That's on a
In
further
return.
slide too. What we're giving you is an economic development project that cannot happen in a town like Newnan without some partnership. So the level of partnership, so what I'm asking you to give is a template of things that are possible.
Like what? What are those
Not
items
the,
you want?
it's in the, I'll get to that in just a second if you don't mind, so I can read through it for you. But all of those items, when you get to going through the deal, are not necessarily items that will be required based on the cost of the project. So this is kind of a chicken and the egg thing. If we had the building already drawn, we knew exactly where it was gonna go, I knew exactly how much it was gonna cost, then I could take a sheet like that and I could say, this one I do need, because this is the bottom line number and it's gotta pay this debt service over here and these investors back. Right now, we don't know that. So what that represents is a traditional framework to get to an MOU. Not something I would expect to give to the city and them say, oh, this looks great, and sign it.
All right, so let me throw this out at you, and I don't hate to, but I'm really here to hear your offer and us to
Okay.
consider it rather than getting an education on hotel
Okay,
performance, because we know performance are just a big guess.
sure,
So,
sure.
all right. If Newnan was a hot market for a hotel downtown. Okay. Normal deals would actually have a number in there for land to buy it,
Sure.
correct? And so am I assuming, based on what you just said, that Newnan is not such a hot market for a hotel? And so we need to actually give the land away for free and build some parking and do some other stuff to actually make the numbers work? Because the city, if we had to add all that in, like a normal project is,
Right.
most hotels, you buy the land, you put it in your parking lots, you do your own parking,
Sure.
all that. We aren't able to sustain that, or cover that cost with the nightly rate or occupancy.
That's
Is that correct?
That is
Okay.
absolutely correct.
Okay,
yes.
all right, thank you.
But there's a caveat to that, and one of the reasons why, and I know you could look at pro formas and that you kind of wanted me to tell you what the cost is gonna be. I'm not a developer from Atlanta. I'm not gonna come to your town and say, I built 50 of these cookie cutter hotels that I throw some brick on the outside of and call it a custom hotel. The only thing I want to do is the types of hotels that we have done in Thomasville, that we're doing in Bainbridge, that we're working on doing in other towns. Those hotels are more expensive than what a bigger company's gonna come and make look a certain way.
Right.
So we're here to be a partner with the city of Newnan, where we say, what is it that the community wants? So the only thing I can give you at this point with any certainty is what I think that the revenue numbers would be, which is why I lead with a pro forma, because I want everybody to know up front, this is the amount of money we probably have to cover debt service. So when we start having those conversations about going from 4 to 5, we start having those conversations about, can we take the top of the roof off and make a patio? Well, we have to reinforce the building. That might be $500,000, $750,000. So I wanted to start with the things that I know and then find out what it is that you guys want and then have that conversation. But the way the LOI was laid out was asking for a response to a possible outline for an MOU. And that possible outline for the MOU can include any number of creative things, including land. We've done pilot programs where the pilot tax, because you're working through a development authority, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th year actually are designed, because those are not tax payments, those are payments in lieu of tax, are designed to pay back land costs, because the city wants to show on their books that they're getting paid for the land that they bought. There's other cities that have no problem putting that land cost up as land into the deal, and that's, sometimes that land is valued depending on the city, sometimes that land is a valuable asset. In the case of Bainbridge, maybe it's a piece of land on the river that requires $2 million worth of site work, so it's almost like we're paying $2 million for a site that's free. So we don't know the answers to those questions either, because I believe at this point, there's also not any geotech or phase one or anything on the site. So the reason, this conversation is probably early to get the answer to all of those questions, but it's good that it's early because this is supposed to be a special project with the input of the community that's gonna be something that's a 50, 100-year building in downtown Newnan. So, you know, that's kind of where we have to start, I think, if that makes sense.
So let's step on through the rest of the
Okay?
presentation.
All right, and so what I did try to include here was so that you could take this afterwards and sort of take those two numbers and put them together, is that I do believe if you do 4 stories, you do an L shape, you get somewhere between that 112, 13, and 125 rooms. Similarly designed quality to Thomasville. This shows you what a building would cost to build. This is Marriott's numbers. They show you what the prototypical cost of their building is supposed to be. Now, these are averages. Could cost more. You've had a lot of inflation lately, so these numbers could be a little outdated from 2023, but this is the most recent numbers they have. And then what we do is we take those numbers, and I've actually contacted our GC partner, Pinkerton and Laws out of Atlanta, and they were able to give this to their estimators, thinking of the quality of materials in Thomasville, thinking of that L shape, that site, that 125 rooms, and they were able to come up with some cost estimates. The cost estimate at the top is the number to build the hotel, which you see at the bottom is coming out to be about 20% higher than a prototypical cost of a hotel. So to put that in perspective, we can kind of answer that other question further is if we're projecting the hotel to do about $10 higher than a typical courtyard, but we might be looking at it to do maybe 10% occupancy less because it's not on the side of the highway right there at a demand driver. And we're hoping that that'll build over time. That 20% cost would be not typical to the same 125 room built on the side of the highway. So that's kind of some of those increased costs that have to be covered in order for this to be a reasonable investment.
Any parking in there? Any driveways, parkings, and that cost, is that just a pad up?
So the second line there, the,
I can't read it.
yeah, it's hard to read, but you've got a copy there is the site work.
Okay.
That includes all your site work and hardscapes, so your
There's
parking lot,
parking-
sidewalks.
That's parking as well? All your parking you need?
It does.
So you wouldn't need any additional parking from the city?
No, sometimes we would do leases of parking, so in this one, this number is if we had surface parking. Did not want to assume the city would enter into an agreement for parking.
But you mean if you have if you can build surface parking, is that?
That would be your
Okay.
average amount of the cost of the
So you're-
site work
so
for
if you have the amount
125
of land-
parking
If we
spaces.
give you the amount of land, you're gonna build all your parking you need in those numbers?
All the parking, all the sidewalks, everything, that would be. So sometimes though, it's, this number, you know, is misleading because this is average number before a geotechnical or a phase one survey. And that can change quite a bit if you have unsuitable soils. So again, these are just averages. And what I tried to do here to sort of help you out with answering some of these questions is this shows what it would be if it was just prototypical. This shows kind of the premium to the build. And this is just the premium to build surface parking, no fifth floor rooftop bar or anything like that. But it would be similar to Thomasville at this cost. And to the right is just to show you, it's just a recap slide to show you the average cost. That way you had the cost right next to the expense categories for when you wanted to look at it in the future. So, any questions from this slide?
Anyone?
You need the city to build the access off of Broad Street? Is that what you're looking for? So you're gonna come off of that, you're gonna come off of this road right here? Is that your plan on those numbers? So you're trying to understand what I'm.
The plan on the numbers is the hotel would be situated as an L on that 1 acre site.
Okay,
It does not, exactly specify which direction the L is gonna be, because I think that's
Yeah,
up
I
to
don't-
your master plan and how y'all want it to be oriented. But yes, we would expect a cut off of Broad. Now, there's gonna be some questions also about, utility services. So there's stormwater, there's utilities, there's costs that are associated with site work that are sometimes already at the site. Sometimes they're not. It really just depends. So those are conversations that would have to be saved for more specific cost conversations, I believe.
What's
once
your
we get-
assumption right now? That you have
The
utilities
assumption
or
is that there would be, utilities to the site.
no? Okay,
No, not necessarily. That's not tap and impact and meter fees and things like that. That's just utilities existing to be tapped into.
okay, 10-4, thank you.
And that may or may not be the case on this site, so. And this is, the second question to the answer is to what does Newnan get? And I know that this is one of those slides, and I hope you have the printout in front of you, and I'm sorry it's so small, I didn't realize that it would show up that way on the presentation. I'm gonna walk over to it so I can make sure I see it. But these, a lot of times economic development numbers, and I'm sure your city staff can attest to this, are not necessarily seen as real numbers when it comes to development. They would say, well, yeah, that's good, but that's not a real cash flow. But I would disagree. One of the things you hear in the news right now is the whole debate between higher taxes versus more business, more revenue to drive more tax. This basically is that argument, that conversation in a nutshell. You know, what it shows here for this building at those revenue values, and this does not, typically you could also have someone do a build cost matrix where it shows all of the economic impact from just building the building, developing the site, putting those people to work. But this is just after the hotel is open, and it's for the first 5 years. It shows your sales tax contribution. Hopefully this is correct for Newnan. I've tried to make sure it's correct. Sometimes it's different. So that 3% includes your lost cost, East lost type funds, would be $165,000. The occupancy tax contribution, assuming you guys are at the 8%,
Yes, sir.
is another $440,000 per year. To give you an example, we have about 12 hotels. We own the Hampton Inn, which is an older build. It was the first interior quarter hotel in Thomasville back in 1997. But it's not special, it's a prototypical hotel on highway. And our two hotels, there's about 13 hotels, counting the older style hotels, pay about half of the occupancy taxes in Thomasville. And these funds here, and I'm not sure how y'all use those, are like kindling on the fire. So this helps you bring more people to town to spend more money. I'm very passionate about that one because I'm on boards for that. So again, utility spend, your utilities community. This would be the average yearly utility spend. This does not take into consideration your rates. I didn't get that deep into it, but an average rate. So your total yearly direct contribution to the city's funds would be $730,500, with a 5-year contribution being $3,652,500. This is where it gets really cumulative or builds upon itself is this strictly the economic development part of it. This is the way that they talk about the number of guests that will stay in your town is not the number of rooms you rent, it's the number of guests. The current average for a town this size and for Thomasville is, what they say, 1.5. You can't have a half a guest, but obviously it's just 1.5 guests per room, which with our 5-year average goes up to that number of about 49,500 people a year that will come out of the hotel and down onto the street to spend business in your, spend money in your current businesses and restaurants. The 2023 Economic Impact Report from American Hotel and Lodging Association averaged at $220 per guest per day. And that does not include the spending on the accommodations itself. It's just the spending outside of gas stations, restaurants, and shops. So that would give you a yearly local guest spend of $10,890,000 with a 5-year coming in at about $54,500. That number then is also obviously multiplied because those people that receive that money also spend that money again. There's also sales tax associated with those sales that you go back up to the top line. We also will based it off of exactly what Courtyard's doing now, which is 27 full-time equivalent employees. Full-time equivalents, but some of them are part-time, others are full, some are salary, some are hourly. And that, employee payroll would be somewhere around 955, 808. Full disclosure, I probably used the higher of the payroll number off of the 5 averages because slides meant to be a little more dramatic. But, so even with that, though, you're looking at about a $5 million total, 5-year payroll. Again, those people also spend their money in the community. That generates more tax dollars. Now, in your example MOU, it does call for some sort of tax abatement. That's generally something that is not a heavy lift for a development authority because they don't pay taxes per se on the land anyway. So that's something that is usually an easy offset for cities. So we did assume it in the MOU, but what I did was after that property tax abatement goes away, you're looking at about $250,000 a year. And that's just an estimate. I didn't try to take your millage rates and really get the 100% real number, but that should be fairly close. And with a total 5-year contribution of property tax being $1.25 million.
Hey, Jeremy, in Thomasville, how many stories do y'all have?
4.
4, okay.
4.
So you know where we are, we're going downhill, and then we're right next to a residential area.
That's correct.
And we had an old mill there that was like equivalent of 4 stories, is that right? So my thought would be to soften that, so we don't have this big 5-story thing, and then we go into a residential area. I mean, I feel like it needs to just soften on out into residential. So I'm not a big fan of even 4 stories, really. I mean, I'd love, but I'm just trying to understand, so when we go back and talk, we understand. This drawing here with these little lots, that was just somebody scribbling one day.
Sure.
What I wanted from you is, what do you need drawn out, okay? And if you could, so you could just, if you could survive on a 3-story, is that right? You just need more land, is that how it works?
That's exactly how it works, yes.
You
Now,
gotta-
let me say that's not 100% true because the building would be slightly less efficient. Just
Okay.
like when you build a house, the more the roof,
Okay,
the roof and the foundation are expensive. So it'd be a less efficient build, but not efficient enough if it was a goal of the city to make sure that if that was one of the requirements for the build, it wouldn't be inefficient enough not to consider it.
okay. You got any idea how much acreage you'd need for,
Yeah, your
Stories of parking.
prototypical surface parking, you're looking at about 2.5 acres.
2.5 acres, okay.
So if you wanted any type of meeting
Which is about
space
what we
coming
got,
off.
right? If we don't include the road, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
about 2.5, and if you want to do any type of extra meeting space for the blocks that we talked about, or any real softening, let's say you wanted to do 3, but then you even wanted to go to 2, you might want to go to 3 acres.
Yeah, thank you.
I got
So-
a question.
Sure.
I'm glad you led into the orientation of the building and talking about being on the low spot and that kind of thing. This actually is in the spot that is, can we go back to the site plan?
Sure.
Um,
Stop me when I get to the one you're wanting to look at. You want to look at the concept plan from,
concept plan.
okay.
Right,
This one or
that one.
that one? Okay.
So, I understand the concern about being next to residential and all that, but according to this design, you're really not right up next to the residential area. So the 5 stories, it would depend on what's across the street as to whether or not you see the full effect of that 5 stories. in the
Right.
process Next to the residential, because that's a very important, I would gander to say that's more important than what's behind it to the residential side, because that's what they're gonna be looking at.
That's correct.
We've been talking about this site because of course this is the one we want.
Sure.
But one of the things that I feel like we're trying to create here is expanding what we love about downtown Newnan into this site by breaking it up into blocks. So one of the things that I love about downtown Newnan is that we have our sites and they don't turn their back to the rest of downtown. They are blocks that face each other and address each other, so to speak. It's one of those terms used in architecture. And so in this, I feel like we're turning our back to the site right next to it, as opposed to addressing that part of the block as well. And one of the things that we talked about in this concept design, I don't know, they've done these massing studies, these blocking studies. And we have, of course, the corridor here, the Andrew Street extension. There's also some pedestrian things that go almost all the way up to that business that's up there, the redevelopment opportunity at the top of that old mill. Yeah, the industrial building there. There's, according to the overall design that we've had done to give us ideas about how to design, this is, of course, a historic area. It's on the National Register. And one of the things that it points out about that block is that parts of that block are historic business district within our business district. And I think it would be great to have some sort of, pedestrian way that goes all the way through, that can address that corridor. We have some businesses tucked over in there. I just don't want to see us ruin this opportunity of addressing that corridor, turning it into active space that the hotel would have access to, that would be a view, a real view, where we've got, art and things like that present there. And I wanted to know if you were open to that type of thing.
So you just sort of made me happy and sad at the same time, because one of the enemies of downtown projects, and that's something that I told somebody this story, it's going to sound cheesy, but I was actually, when we were doing this, I've been in the hotel business since I was a kid, and I've managed and owned hotels on the sides of highways and airports and places like that all my life, so I've always been in the hotel business. But after, when Amazon took over and it went to this downtown, and then with COVID and regional travel sort of picked back up, and people were looking for unique experiential things as opposed to going to the mall or going to the shopping, I was entrenched in the downtown development, tourism, Main Street part in my local community, and the politics was hard, right? The politics was challenging, but it was worth it. And so after we got that project done and all the conversations it took and the people asking the questions like that is the reason why I'm sort of addicted to this thing now. So it's like my passion, which it doesn't seem like it because I'm not very at home talking in front of a group like this. I'm more at home sitting down around a table talking about it, but is being able to still do my business, but then do it in a way that brings something unique to a town. So just let me show you what I didn't want to get overcomplicated things, but this green space right here really spoke to me. And when I saw some of your initial plans, because I've had several studies done and I've seen all of those, where you have a lawn in the middle and it's a public park and it activates that space. I like the idea of, I like the way, when I did a tour of your community, that was one of the things that I brought back to Thomasville, was how you activate the backs of your building. Because you're taking the blocks and you're making them bigger. And that's something we did if you had a chance to go down to the amphitheater. We have a historic district like that, it's called the Bottoms. It was a historically black business-owned community. And so they expanded our downtown, uncovered all the bricks and took it down for that and did a whole nother facade on that area, and then when they did that, they smartly used the backs of those buildings back into the amphitheater, into another event space. So am I against being anywhere on the site, in any configuration, in any creative way? I want to be on this site in the most creative and advantageous way possible. This is just a site that fits, based on the parameters that I've seen that have been presented to you already. So I'm open to that type of conversation.
One of the things that we've had several studies done, and I can't remember the names of them who've done them by now, but one of the things that they had talked about with hotels coming in downtown was out of the, I think Sonoy was one of the cities, and there was another city, and Newnan was the third on the list. No, we weren't the number one, we weren't number two, but we were number three. And that was really related to, so my question is related to the proximity to the railroad tracks. So since I really want your take and your feedback as to, do you have any projects that sit near a railroad track? Do you see any issues with the railroad track? Because it sounds often. So I would like your feedback on that, please.
So it has its annoyances, and I had to chase the bank across the street from the meeting room that y'all used when you came down. They like to blow the parking lot every morning at 7 a.m. So those noises do have a guest impact, they do. But I don't know if you noticed, but when you were in Thomasville, that hotel is actually 1.5 blocks from a railroad track. And so, and you don't really notice. I did point out, and there's ways to soundproof ends of buildings.
So my question would be, is it as busy as the one that we have?
I believe so. It's
Okay.
fairly active now. And then Bainbridge, our hotel there, is also about 1.5 blocks from a railroad track. But I've seen hotels built directly on top of transit lines. There's a way to soundproof that. That is an expense. But I did want to point out something on the site that I thought was important to your site plan, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Me commenting on something that's not my expertise. I believe that makes this road sort of important to the overall development of the site, because it'll serve, those buildings can turn their back to the railroad track. And so if you have a retail business or an ice cream shop or anything that's in that railroad building, or a parking garage if you wanted to do something like that, that helps to mitigate that sound. And puts kind of a barrier between you and not only the hotel, but all the interior part that you might do, any event that you might have on the site. So I do think that while it's not the end of the world and it can be soundproof and it can be designed in such a way that it's okay, I believe that makes this part of your site more important than necessarily the hotel being too close. That rectangle there is probably a more important solution to that
And
question.
Jeremy, I'll interrupt you. Council doesn't remember, because I was the only one sitting here when the Newnan lofts happened.
Right.
Just right up the railroad track north of this site. And, you know, the developers from Atlanta wanted to come in with the Headleys and do the Newnan lofts apartments, not hotel, where you come in, you stay 2 nights and you're gone usually.
Sure.
But an apartment where you live there all the time. And one of the main questions was at that time, how are you gonna be successful doing these apartments when they're on a railroad track? And I think they're probably about 90 to 95% occupancy rate down there. So your point's taken. People live on railroad tracks. The noise is what it is.
Sure.
It becomes, over a period of time, I think, I mean, I'm blocks away from a railroad track, but I can hear the railroad. I mean, there's no way not to.
Sure.
And I developed another subdivision right here in Newnan that was right behind the railroad track.
Sure.
$700,000, $800,000 houses.
Right.
So people live on railroad tracks and they
Oh,
stay on
yeah.
railroad tracks. So
I understand what you're saying. I just wanted to hear him say it.
The other thing too,
now he
the other thing
said
too
it,
is,
and I hope I've validated his comment.
you do, and a lot of things too is that the better the place you are, the less annoying and more
Right.
endearing the track becomes.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there's places in Charleston, South Carolina, I'm leaving there to go visit some hotels I work with in Charleston. And if you were on George Chester Road next to the railroad tracks, you probably wouldn't find the sound very, very nice. But if you're in a downtown in a beautiful city like Newnan, it's something that you sort of find, it's just part of the deal, right?
So anybody want to jump in, or?
You got the floor.
Okay. With this type of project, and as you've, in other cities with Thomaston or Thomasville, and then when you get into Bainbridge and your other developments, what have you noticed when you put the hotel in a strategic area What have you noticed from the collateral development that's taken place around such said project, that areas that really have gone undeveloped in a previous time? Have you, such a project influenced new businesses coming in, et cetera, some different types of quality homes, et cetera? Have you noticed anything, experienced any of that?
Yes, in Thomasville especially, it even changed the hours that the businesses were willing to stay open and the days of the week that they were willing to stay open because of the additional people in the downtown area. It also has an impact on the perceived safety of the area because there's people walking around. Specifically in Bainbridge, it was located next to their big park, Chasen Park project that they're doing, which if you haven't seen it, you should look it up. It's very beautiful. And they've got this long park, river walk, and we're going to be sort of the terminus of that. And it's going to be one of the things that's instrumental in that park not being vacant at night and to become blighted. And so Thomasville doesn't have a whole lot of space in between where we are because we were surrounded by historic districts. But the one street, which was Remington, where you walk back down to Broad, businesses have started taking those. Even the city of Thomasville and the Downtown Development Authority that I'm on, and the Tourism Authority, is looking at actually doing more projects sort of coming back that direction. So there's going to be private and city funding, and then there's also the safety aspect of it as well. So
Thank you.
I have seen that, yeah.
Good, good, okay. Anyone else? Anything else?
No, I think I've included a copy of the MOU. Oh, I included two copies here. I included a copy, and this was just, doesn't have to be for conversation purposes, but I've included a copy of what I gave as my response for a possible development agreement structure. This is something that has been used in the past. Again, this is not the model, this is just the guide. So this was meant to start that conversation. The other part is this, and it's sort of, it looks simplistic, but what this does, and I really don't know if you even care about this, but what it does, it shows you from day one feasibility study that you've already done, all the way down to opening, what the different milestones are in this project. So it kind of gives you some perspective of all the things that we would have to do anyway to get to a development agreement or to a deal. So I just left that with you as well for your information.
Mayor Brady, members of the council, if I may,
Sure.
thank you, Mr. Emmett, thank you, Jeremy, for seeing, thanks for traveling up here, and for answering all the questions and being so open with the information. I think Mr. Phillips, Ms. Kelsey, and I have talked, and I think, each of you have seen the documents that Mr. Emmett's talked about. I think, in time, do a little bit of due diligence and respond to him in time. So probably convene again as a group in time and come back to him.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Any comments from anyone?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last couple
I
words
said
that
we
you
would convene again in time to respond to the proposed plan that was presented previously.
Okay, correct. Anyone else?
We did have our designer come to this meeting.
Yes.
I wonder if they have
Questions?
You're right. Yeah, historical concepts, they're here, they're in the room at your request, they're here, there.
So,
Y'all could have told me I was commenting on their work and they were sitting right there behind me.
Yeah, we didn't want to start anything.
That's up to
Hopefully
the
you took
council.
it
No questions?
You took
Well,
the note.
question over here.
Oh.
Mr. Chairman, you'll need to come up to
I'm
the,
certainly, is it from,
you'll need to come, Ms. Chapman, you'll need to come up to the mic. It won't pick, the sound system won't pick it.
This property would be a part of our neighborhood, our historic district, and I really like what you presented. My question to both you and to council is, what is my neighborhood going to be looking out at? The front of your building is very appealing. What we do not want to look out at is the backs of all these buildings and their dumpsters. We are just as much a part of downtown Newnan as the courthouse square. We feel that. We spend a lot of time down here. But what we don't want to do is look out our windows at dumpsters. So I'd like for everyone to take that into consideration. Do you have any pictures of what we would be looking at?
so in our project in Thomasville, we went to great lengths, we actually had a design committee that we met with, probably 10 or 12 times, just to go over some of those sensitive topics about what they did and didn't want to look at. In that particular build, because of the way we were oriented, we actually had, and I'm not saying that this will be this way on this building, because we live in the house, we live in the site, but it was oriented on the side in a way that it did face, the end of the building did face, a historic home. And we actually added a garage door with a trash compactor so that the dumpster and all that area was inside of the building. So that's not something that would be on every project, but it is kind of a link we went to on our project to actually try to address questions like that that do make a difference to people.
Yeah, we would just want you to be a good neighbor. We keep our property very well maintained, and we would want to see the same thing out of your property. And as for your question about the train, when we built our home, we took the train into consideration. We put additional insulation, and do we hear the train? Absolutely. Does the train bother us? Not at all. And we're there every night, so.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I want to give you some encouragement too. So all the folks that live behind us in the historic district, because like I said, we were surrounded by historic homes on all sides. And there were some of the most vocal critics, and vocal critics are part of this process as well, because there's a reason why you're passionate, because you love your town and you
Right.
think that's why things get built that we can all love, right? Well, they're satisfied to the point where we posted all their children's wedding, and there's a group of about 15 ladies that live in that subdivision that play mahjong in the lobby in the afternoons. So we're good. We
That's
want
what we want
better
to
than
hear.
good neighbors.
That's what we want to hear, is that you would be a good neighbor and take the neighborhood into consideration.
That would be our goal.
Okay. Thank you.
So Jimmy, just to close up, Mr. Craver attempted to do that a second ago, but we're gonna move on to another comment. So if you'll come back up, I do have a question. Could you describe to us the process that you might suggest that we use to step through the design phase on this to see where the community is? I mean, we have done those things before, and certainly Historical Concepts is very aware of charrettes and how you step through that, but is it the same type of process that I just described?
It is. So if you looked at that, that's one of the reasons I gave you that sort of milestone.
Right,
And you
sure.
sort of skipped around because you are separately dealing with historical concepts on a larger site. So in some smaller areas where the site's just a one build type site, part of the deal would be a concept plan very similar to what Historical Concepts is doing, but it would be specific to the hotel.
To the hotel.
So that would have been one of my next questions, was how did we want to handle the development of the concept plan? And I would have suggested that you probably, I think I did suggest this, that we probably let us work with Historical Concepts to incorporate it into the larger plan. At the same time, that larger plan can be multi-phased. So, we don't want to get to a point where we're trying to build the hotel concept with stuff that's not really going to happen anytime in the next 5 or 10 years. We would want to maybe develop it in phases where this is the part of the site. I think that's why we really looked at the front of the site. Could have very well been the back of the site. But I think one of the reasons we looked at the front is because it kind of spoke as maybe earlier in the development process than further back into the site. So I would say, the long story short, I would say work with the Historical Concepts to let us work with them, just giving them some feedback, taking your feedback to come up with maybe an idea that you might have for the outside of the hotel. We can give them the footprints, the building plans, the prototypes, that you could then have all your measurements so that what you're drawing is actually representative of what would actually be there. And I would suggest doing that. Our architects are also capable of doing that. And if this was a single site that was not being suggested, that's what I would have suggested to you, is let our architects do a concept plan for you.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that.
Just one more, again, for my memory. The site the acreage you're going to need is roughly is 2.5, is that right?
So it's very flexible. So the
That would be
hotel
the- that would be
footprint
the most,
fits, the hotel footprint fits in that 1 acre site. But if you wanted to do it all surface parking,
Right.
you would need 2.5 acres, and if you wanted to do it, less stories, then you would have to have a little bit more land.
Okay,
Now, I will tell you that, Marriott would not, and us would not require, they only require parking that is reasonable for the guest's, experience. So, and in a downtown like this, that's usually within 1.5 to 2 blocks, with some unloading parking closer to the building.
okay, thank you.
So would you entertain any parking you build to be shared parking?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think on a site like that, it makes a lot of sense because, and thank you for bringing that up, because one of the ways that a hotel actually works well with a multi-use development like that is that the hotel generally only uses parking between about 5 o'clock at night and 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. Checkout time's at 12, and on the weekends, it could be a little bit longer than that. But generally, your guests are gone, a lot of your business guests are gone at 7:30, 8 o'clock. You've got a big empty parking space in there during the middle of the day, so.
Hey, just one last question. I feel like if I was selling you a piece of dirt, you would be doing all this work with historical concepts and your architect and all that, and I would just own the dirt and I just wait for my check when we go to the closing table. And I feel like we're really involved in this whole thing, okay, which is exciting. Have you ever done it where there's a profit sharing where if this thing is wildly successful, the city actually gets some money back since it's given everything in up front for free?
That is a question for a legal group, I guess, for you to talk to, but that is something that has been presented. We have not done one that's profit sharing. We have done one that is going to be completely owned by the city on tax-free bonds, but it's not advisable.
Yeah, we wouldn't.
So,
We don't want to be in the hotel business.
no.
No. Or at least I don't want to be in the hotel business.
Usually the way you would work something out that way would be some sort of milestone or parameters on revenue so that because remember I said we don't want incentives that we don't need. So if we wanted to make the financing extra safe, you could provide some incentive that was phased out over time on revenue goals or something like that, so that the payments were being made, but then you don't have to keep giving it if we don't need it, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything else? Mr. Craver, you want to try it again? No?
No,
Okay.
sir, thank you.
Good.
No.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have our regular meeting starting at 6:30. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, I'll entertain a motion. We adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second, we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen.